to Schools Forum on 15th of the 12th, 2022. This meeting is being recorded, and yeah, I will start with the welcome and apologies. So I think I've done the welcome. Welcome everybody. If I can also welcome Anna Pendleton, who is joining us as a primary forum rep and represents Rednall Hill Infant School. Welcome, Anna. And we also have Patrick Grant from the DFE. So welcome, Patrick.
Thank you very much.
And Kate, I'm going to welcome you, but you're going to get to introduce yourself later, if that's okay. So welcome. Thank you, everybody. Is there anybody else who is new to the meeting? I haven't been made aware of anybody else that's joined as a member. So if there is anybody else, if you could make yourself known, that'd be great. Tim?
James, thank you. I'm not new to the meeting. I think I could claim being the oldest bit of furniture in the room. But somebody raised it with me at the end of last meeting as to what I'm doing at the meeting. A long time ago, when Bet first got the contract, I joined Schools Forum as a technical advisor because I'm not a local authority officer. Neither am I representing a forum or head teachers. So I just thought that was probably helpfully recorded if that's still what forum wants out of me. But it was because somebody asked the question about my status at the meeting last time I was here. So technical advisor is the historic label that went by my name.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for that. That is appreciated. And if I can also welcome Helen Ellis, Assistant Director for SEND. And Helen, I think you'll get an opportunity to introduce yourself later as well. Okay, thank you. I have had apologies from Les Lawrence. Harinder, I'm not sure if Harinder is on the call. Is anybody else aware of any other apologies?
Simon Bartlett.
Thank you. We could record Simon Bartlett as having sent his apologies. That would be appreciated.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. If I can then go on to the minutes and the matters arising. If I could ask if you've got your mic on, if you could mute it if you're not speaking, thank you. Okay, if I can go through the minutes to start off with to ensure that they are an accurate representation of the meeting that was held, I'll go page by page. So page 1, if you wish to put your hand up, if you wish to make a comment or identify that there is an inaccuracy, that would be great. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Okay, in that case, I believe we are happy to accept the minutes as an accurate reflection of the meeting, and thank you. Thank you, Nadia. If I can go through the actions, I have written to Janice to thank her for her many years of service, the previous chair. Action 5.1, work on modelling and falling role pupils to be presented at the next technical group meeting. This is to be revisited with input from Jazz Didiali about how this will be best executed, and Jazz is presenting that today. And then information regarding the high needs block for 21, 22, 22, 23 to be circulated to the invitees, and that's from Daniel Dawson, needs to be sent to the chair by Julie Beattie. I don't think I've received that. Helen, just to say there may be a few actions regarding SEND, so I'm going to refer those to you if that's okay on this occasion, and you may not be able to answer them today, but if you're aware of the actions around SEND, I think without an AD for SEND, that there are a number of questions that have been raised. So if you could make note of those, that would be appreciated.
I'll make a note of them and I'll take them away if that's okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Helen. And action, Councillor McCarthy, to take the feedback regarding Oracle to the Director of Finance.
I certainly did, and I believe it's an item on today's agenda.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Chair, you've got a hand up from Julie Beattie, which might refer to that high needs action.
Yep. Thank you, Kate. Julie.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm having trouble with Teams at the moment, so I've been able to put my hand up. I did forward you the email from Dan Dawson. Dan sent it in June, but I re-forwarded it after the meeting on October. I forwarded it to yourself and Nadia. If you need me to re-forward it again for circulation, I can do so.
I will. Nadia, if you could send that to all members, that would be really appreciated.
Yeah, I will do.
Thank you.
Thank you
sorry,
very
Julie, I
much.
must have
Thank
missed
you.
that.
No, that's fine.
Thanks
Not
for the
a problem.
update.
I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you. Okay, and then Claire Sandland to inform all schools who pay for financial services support about the plan.
I think all of this will be covered under the Oracle item.
Thank you. And then Claire Sandland to set up Oracle Focus Technical Group. The same, Claire?
Yeah, there was a discovery session held, so Paul will be at the end of the agenda updating on that discovery session.
Okay, thank you. 6.7, monitoring the impact of the accountability and the use of the DLP funding to be part of the SEND report at the December meeting. Helen, if I can, I'll pass that over to you if that's okay. And 8.2, SEND update to be added to the agenda for December meeting, which you're going to be delivering, so thank you. And Lisa Fraser to arrange an induction for new schools forum members before the next meeting. Can I just pick up here? I believe that there are 2 dates in January for new members for schools forum that were arranged. I'm aware that Lisa isn't in work at the moment. I'm just checking that there will be somebody from the local authority who will be able to cover those induction sessions.
James, I'll make sure that is done. I don't know that I have the dates in my diary, but if somebody can send those to me, if the clerk can send those to me, then I'm very happy to do that for you. Yeah,
That'd be great. Thank you, Kate. Okay. And then the financial information that needs to be provided to the forum. Zhao, I don't think we've had an opportunity to resolve that.
Oh, sorry. I thought, financial information needs to be provided to the forum. We didn't get a chance to discuss, but I thought last meeting, because you were asking for the breakdown for the schools carry forward, and it was published on the website for all the LA schools.
Okay, thank you. I think what we'll do is we'll if we can share the website for that for all members, I think that would be appreciated. So if we include that with the documentation that we're sharing from Julie, that would be great. Thank you. And then I think we can consider that action completed. Okay.
Chair, I don't know if it would be helpful. I think you and I had an initial discussion about this, didn't we, in another forum, that you and I meet in the new year and discuss actually both a programme for the schools forum, but also what information needs to go where and the process of gathering that. Would that be helpful?
I think that would be really useful, Kate, and I think it may resolve a number of the issues that we're facing here. I think it's the way that we're communicating and sharing the information. Thanks, Kate.
Okay, let's set that up. If somebody can record that as an action for me, then that will be fantastic.
Thank you. And action, Lisa Fraser to create a maintained school technical group to discuss the options relating to the funding shortfall before the next school forum. This is in regard to the school improvement contract. Consider what the local authority can offer and look at how other authorities are dealing with it. Tim, I think in the pre-meeting you managed to give an update there. Tim or Kate, do you want to take that and just share that?
Well, certainly since the last forum meeting, Lisa let me know that the decision had been taken to meet the shortfall internally for this coming year. But I think that the paper that we had at short notice about the Central Schools Block lays out more clearly or methodically the local authority's intention to look at all the things that are impacted by that cut to the Central Schools Block, and says that it's going to talk to all the relevant people and come back to us.
Great. Okay, so the technical group wasn't set up, but we have a resolution for this year, and we will review what that looks like in next year with regard to the school improvement contract moving forward. Yep. Okay, thank you. Catherine?
I just want to repeat what I said in the pre-meeting, that if we're going to look at this issue and look at options, can we do it, you know, rather than leaving it a year and then there being another sort of sword of Damocles at the last minute? It would be good to programme a proper process and to get the work done during the year. Yeah.
Kate, I'm wondering if that is something that we can.
Yeah, that's something I think
we can pick up in our discussion.
Yeah, we are on the same page. I think we're almost talking at the same time and saying we'll do that as part of the meeting that we have that discusses a programme and what needs to come to schools forum when and how we make sure that that's a much slicker process. So we'll take a look at that in the new year.
Yeah, and I think if you could include that line about the school improvement as an act within that action, that would be great. Thank you, Nadia. Work programme SEND, Helen, I'm going to pass that over to you. Work programme to be added as a permanent item to the agenda, and I think that brings in the last action, which is from Councillor McCarthy and Lisa, about mapping what is happening in SEND. And a paper to be presented to Sue to map out the responsibilities. I know you're relatively new to post, Helen, but I think you've got a feeling of the focus that we've got on SEND at Schools Forum, and I think I've explained the reasons why. So thank you. Okay. If there is nothing else from the minutes, Catherine, you've still got your hand up. Is that a legacy hand or? Okay. You are speaking, Catherine. I think you're still on mute.
Yeah, you may be about to say this, James, but I do want to register dissatisfaction with getting the papers so late. It makes discussion of some of the items very difficult, and I know you were concerned about that as well, but I don't know whether I should have known they were attached to something else or the technical thing, but I actually got mine at 12:15, and it just means that I don't feel I can contribute at the level that I would normally wish to do so.
I think that's a view shared by many, Catherine, so thank you for sharing that. I think it does make it very difficult for members to contribute. When we did get the papers, many members received the papers at such short notice. I think we accept that in good intention they were attached to the invite, but I think many of us have actually struggled to access them through that invite. I'm not sure if that's the way that it's been set up. I think if we can agree in future that all papers will be shared via email directly to all members, I think this will remove this this confusion moving forward. Is that fair enough, Pam?
Yes, just an extension of that, really. I wonder, Chair, when we're coming to making a decision about something, whether as a group we might want to consider whether we've had sufficient time to make a decision, or if the decision isn't absolutely, you know, essential for this meeting, that we listen to what's been said and then we can give it further consideration and actually make the decision in the January meeting, which, for after all, is fairly soon on next term. And I just thought that might be a consideration as a group that we might want to look at.
Thank you, Pam. I think that's a reasonable suggestion, given the amount of time many of us have had to review the papers. I don't think there are many decisions to make today. I think if the local authority representatives can make it clear if a decision does need to be made today, that would be really helpful, and consider whether or not it could be delayed until the next meeting. Thank you. David?
Chair, thank you. I was just trying to remind myself of the agreement as to when papers are sent out, how far in advance of the meeting. Am I right to believe that that is a week in advance, or is it longer than that?
the agreement was that we would send them the papers out a week in advance, so everybody would receive them the Thursday before.
Yeah, thank you. That's fine. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Zhao?
Right, just to have to apologize for sending the paper out. I did send the paper out last Wednesday to be uploaded on the website, which is the normal process. And then I got response on Thursday to from the person who was dealing with that. And then I went off for a week, just came back today. And then I realized that in my absence, he sent an email on Monday saying the format wasn't right. But you know, I put on my out of office reply, and also there was email trail who to contact. So that was a reason for the delay, but I apologize for that. But going forward, we will make sure that all the papers are sent out in good time, and make sure that if there are any issues, that will be resolved early.
Thank you, Zhao. Kate?
Yes, just very quickly to also apologise on behalf of the local authority for the late circulation of meetings, but also to take on board the suggestion that has been made that in fact we do these as an email attachment rather than attaching them to invites. We can also then upload to the website, but we'll take a look at that and make sure that happens from the new year. Yeah,
that'd be fantastic. Thank you, Kate. Thank you. Okay, and I think that then means, Kate, that's over to you for the local authority update.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. For those who haven't met me, my name is Kate Reynolds. I'm Director of Lifelong Learning and Employability in Birmingham City Council. That means all things post-16, but given that Lisa is not available just at the moment, I too am taking over a little bit of education. I share that with my colleague Trudy Pyatt, who's Director of Thriving Families, which is a title you don't want to say after you've had your Christmas dinner, because you won't do the Thurs particularly well, will you? So I am responsible in terms of education for things like the schools forum, place planning, school governance support, attendance, admissions, the sort of system-y kind of stuff, the stuff that keeps it all going. Trudy is more responsible for the stuff which is really, really about individual children. So elective home education, exclusions, those sorts of things, of course, with a crossover with our lovely colleague Helen, who's here this afternoon. So I'm going to give you a bit of an update, just so you know. My background is predominantly education, of course, lifelong learning and employability as well. But my background is in education, so I know about schools forum, I know about the original legislation that set them up and all those sorts of things. So it's an absolute pleasure to be with you this afternoon, because it's a while since I've been in a schools forum. My last schools forum was Reading, so you can have a look and see how we ran things there. I'm going to give you a quick update of things from the local authority side. Firstly, of course, we welcome Helen Ellis to the meeting as our permanent Director of SEND. And already, I think she's only been with us 6 weeks. She's made a significant difference to the local authority, its children and young people. Some key updates. First of all, of course, there's the whole issue of strep and scarlet fever. Schools know that they have been inundated with all sorts of information about strep and scarlet fever. That's also gone up on the school's notice board. So I direct you to that. If there's any questions that you've got, that should be covered by the information that's been sent to you. And our school and governors support under Fiona Chamberlain is admirably supporting schools when they've got queries. Then the second issue for us is we have sent out to those schools whose communities that they serve suffer the greatest deprivation. We've sent out the funding arrangements for additional funding under the Household Support Fund, and that will be paid to you, I believe, by the end of this week. If you opt in, I think you're all opted into the process, so you have to opt out. There's about 300 schools who, according to the measurements of social deprivation, serve some of our most challenged families, and we're using the Household Support Fund to enable you to be able to support those children and young people and their families, as I know you will do. Thirdly, we've just had a presentation at our own leadership team around the mental health survey that I know a number of schools have completed, and we thank you for the work you've put into that. It gives us some really, really interesting information on the state of play for children and young people's mental health across primary and secondary schools. Then I want to, because of course it's my area, so of course I want to crow about my own area, is to thank anybody who's from the secondary sector, and please pass on to all the schools, secondary schools who have been involved in the September guarantee. As you know, we are required by legislation to make sure that every young person at 16 and 17 has an offer of education, employment and training. In Birmingham, that percentage was 95% this September, which is the highest it's ever been on a cohort of over 31,000 young people. So thanks to everybody, some of whom will be in this room, who have helped us deliver that. We still have an issue about our not knowns. Just because, of course, you make an offer to young people doesn't mean they take up the offer. And we have around 5% of not knowns. So we will be working with you and our colleagues in FE and in Birmingham Children's Trust to find those young people and make sure they're given the support and the opportunities that they deserve. We're working through, and Jazz is here this afternoon, working through the whole issue of school places and admissions and changing PANs. We know there is a surge in secondary schools in terms of places, and that's not unusual. I had the same situation in my previous authority, and that is a decline in primaries. And again, that's not unusual. That seems to be the national picture. Jazz is working very closely with you on how all of that ties together. So I think I have two more issues, one of which is the sad issue, of course, of the death of the young people and children in Solihull. And I thank schools who have been supporting their communities with dealing with what I think everybody has found a hugely sad and traumatic situation. We know some of the emergency first aiders who were involved in that, and some of the stories are just harrowing. So our hearts go out to them. And we ask for your support for any young person, and indeed your staff and your good selves, in terms of the impact that that sort of level of trauma can have on you. So lastly, to much more positive stuff, I would like to pass on to you on behalf of Sue Harrison, the Director of Children's Services, and everybody in Children and Families, our heartfelt thanks for all the hard work that you've done this term, and wish you a very, very festive and peaceful and restful break, because we know next year, 2023, it's come around far too quickly, if you ask me, but it's going to be full of challenges and there will be an awful lot of work to do. We thank you on everybody for all the work that you do for your children, young people and their families. So that's really an update from my side. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Kate. Started talking on my mute. Thank you, much appreciated. Is there, or are there any questions for Kate? No, okay. Just one question, Kate, regarding the household fund. Is there any guidance on how that funding should be spent, or is that down to the schools? I think we've received the grant, but I don't think we've received any guidance. Is there any limitation on what it can or can't be spent on?
Jazz is saying no, so I'm going to say no because she is the expert in these things.
Okay.
And Councillor McCarthy is also an expert around this, so she maybe have further information as well.
Councillor McCarthy, do you wish to come in there?
Yeah, the money we've agreed to distribute this week, which is targeted according to the indices around particularly childhood poverty. The money we're sending to schools and nurseries is entirely flexible for schools to use as they see fit to support their families.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's unusual, but we've managed to do it this time.
No, thank you, and I know that will be appreciated by many families in Birmingham, so thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Thank you, everybody. David?
Yeah, thanks. I was just wondering, just on the same point, it's good to hear that schools are being allowed to spend that money as they see fit, because they are the best. They're best placed to know the needs of their individual pupils and families. Is there any mechanism to ensure that that money is spent? What I'm sure this won't happen, but I'll raise it anyway. We don't want the scenario where we have money unspent in any school's budget. So what's the mechanism for making sure that schools don't, for want of a better phrase, forget about that important money, Chair?
Jazz?
I can come in on that. So there is a requirement for schools to report back to us, because there's a requirement for us to report back to the DFE on that, or rather central government on that. So we're asking for a report in beginning, I think it's beginning towards the end of March. And David, any unspent money has to be, we would like to redistribute it to schools that are eligible under the IDACTI 1 and 2. And if not, then we have to give it back to the government, and we'd rather not do that. Thank you.
Let's spend it, Chair. Let's spend it.
Yes,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't know if you've seen the email, David. The way that money is being tracked is included on the email that's gone to all schools.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, David. Unless there are any other questions for Kate, if Jazz, I think that's over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. So I always start this one off. It's just that time of the year again where I come and tell you all about what this time around is what our requirements are for growth and also for falling roll funds for 2023 and 2024. Just tying in with the discussion that we've had around papers not being available and whether this is a decision. I just want to say that this is, we are very happy for this to be treated as information sharing at this point, right. Because some of the calculation that we're sharing with you are actually they are estimates at the moment, because we've only just received the October census, particularly around falling roll, and it will be in January that we are coming back to Schools Forum to actually ask for a decision. So today it's really about sharing that information. And then also, Chair and colleagues, the other thing I'll say is, obviously, you know, if I was sitting where you are, I'd be saying, well, what's happened to the funding in 22-23? You know, what did that spend look like? And even that one we will report back in January. So it's a look back on how the funding has been spent, and then what we're asking for 23-24 as well, if just to set that scene. So, Chair, I've got about 4 papers to present, but I will absolutely try and keep in with the time limit. And I've also got my colleague Jaspal with me, who will go through some of the finance stuff as well. So if it's okay with you, if I can just share a little bit of the context in terms of growth and what does that look like in Birmingham. It's a PowerPoint that we've shared quite widely. We've shared it with at Schools Forum and at Primary Forum, and we also did a webinar for all schools, etc. So so this is an abridged version of that. So what are the headlines? The headlines in terms of what does mainstream sufficiency, what does it look like? Birth rates are continuing to fall, which is leading to surplus places in primary schools. And we are not only keen working with groups of schools, we are working with groups of schools, and particularly through consortia, and because we want to discuss those area-based solutions. We absolutely believe that we need to do this work with schools to do we need to do this forward planning. It's not just to meet our sufficiency and our obligations, is also to give schools that lead in time that they need to adjust their resources, whether they are growing, which is what it's like in secondary, as Kate said, or whether it's surplus places, and we are working with schools through adjusting their plans to manage that surplus. So there are a couple of things we want to be absolutely certain about, that we are clear that given the level of surplus places in primary, we absolutely do not support any expansions of any primary schools for the foreseeable future. But as Kate was saying, in contrast, the larger cohorts of primary school pupils are moving through secondary, so there is a real pressure on Key Stage 3 places in some areas of the city as well. Just a little graph to show you what that looks like. This is, so the birth rates are continuing to fall. Our highest were here in 2011 and 12. These are the kids that entered our system, the education system, sort of, it would have been in 2016. And then we had another peak in birth in 2016 and 17. But since then, as you can see, we are on the decline here as well. And again, really appreciate that members won't have had time to look at this paper, but happy to take questions either today or also when we come back in January, or in between as well. So in contrast to the birth, usually in contrast to the birth rate falling, we were also reporting quite significant in-year growth, but that's also been falling. However, as you will see that it particularly fell quite significantly in 1819, 1920, but we are seeing growth, in-year growth starting to appear in our schools, primary and secondary as well. So it's nowhere near the levels we were reporting back in the day in 2016, 2017. But certainly we are beginning to see that there are families that are new into the city and children who are new into the system. So this is not domestic migration. This is migration into the city. And a little sort of look at something that always comes up, what about the housing growth? Because that generates new families and that generates new places as well. Yes, absolutely. We have got some very large housing growth. And when we're doing our forecast, all of that is factored in. And as you'll see that with each of the housing growth, there is a requirement for primary places, but again, we are saying there's a commitment to making sure that the existing capacity is used over and above any new schools being planned. Not so for the secondary sector, we will have to plan new schools to tie in with the housing growth to ensure that the families do have, to meet our sufficiency duty and ensure that the families do have access to a local place. Quite complex. It's quite a complex thing planning new schools tied in with housing growth, because when it's a very large housing development, it spans over 20 years. So you almost like forward planning, where you are forward planning for families that will arrive in 10, 15, 20 years time as well. So it's a complex piece of work, but we are absolutely working with our planning colleagues to make sure that school places are factored in, and also that we have our share of development funding. So this is reception forecast compared to capacity. This is more to do with when we talk about the falling growth fund, really. So as you can see, that sort of bottom red line going into blue is the actual May census, and then the blue line is forecast for future years. This will be updated when we get the October census. This will be updated with October census, and then the purple line is the capacity that we have. So if we don't do anything, you can see that the gap between the purple line, our capacity, and our actual, and then the yellow, which is the forecast, and the blue, which is the forecast. You can see that if we don't do something, then we will have huge surplus capacity in our primary schools. Now, the green is what is recommended, which is 5% capacity. So this gap here is where you see that arrow. That's what we're working with schools to reduce and come more in line with the green dotted line rather than the yellow forecast line of there. Other than that, there is a few within the slide pack. It also tells you which areas that surplus sits in. So you can see that there are 3 areas. The P stands for planning area. It's not a page number or anything. So because we work through planning areas in terms of our forecast. So there are 3 planning areas: Nechells, Hodge Hill, Tyburn. There's 25% surplus in reception in 2023. And then you can see that 10% in 2023 in the areas listed in the table on the right as well. So those are the areas that we are concentrating on when we're going to consortia and when we're working with groups of schools. Number of processes, we've talked about this before. We work with schools to adopt a CPN, which is a capped pupil number, and that happens after the admission round is closed and all the offers have been made. And if a school, if a 2FE, with a pound of 60, if the offer have only been 30, then we work with that school to keep that at 30 so that they're not running an empty class. And then there's some advanced work that we do for the following year, which is to seek an in-year variation, so that we are forward planning with that particular school for the following September. And then through consultation to reduce a PAN on permanent basis, that's done through local authority consultation on when we consult on admission arrangements on the coordinated scheme and also on the planned admission numbers, which is live at the moment for 2024. So those are the three ways that we work with schools to enable them to forward plan. And also, I suppose CPN is more in the reactive space, really. And with that, we've got a commitment to continue to do that. We will continue to work with schools. We will continue to respond as the picture emerges as well. We are supporting application for additional falling pupil funding or falling growth funding where schools are eligible. As Kate was saying, we have started the consultation for planned admission numbers for reception 2024, and that's through our schools admission and fair access team. We are liaising with planning and housing departments as well as boarding local authorities to look at the implication of housing proposal and other changes. And also when two schools or a group of schools are proposing reorganisation such as amalgamation or a change of age range, etc., we are supporting all of those elements, working very closely with schools on that. So that's a little bit of context in terms of where we are. Chair, do you want me to take questions now? And then I'll go on to what does that mean for our growth funding?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you, Jazz. Thank you for that. Mike, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, thank you, Jazz. A while ago, the local authority produced some really helpful data, which took intakes 2022 to 2030. And it was broken down into 10 separate planning areas. But this slide, this paper, slide 7, suggests that there's a lot more planning areas than those kind of broader grouping ones. And I think at this point, looking through to the kind of, particularly those in the 10% area, who just need to have quite a precise idea of where they might be, to be able to have that data in that spreadsheet format broken down into the planning areas that this data is based on. To kind of produce a version 2 of that. So as instead of it just being a top level, we've now got it a bit more specifically.
Yeah, Mike, I can come into that. So two things there. We have changed our planning areas. Now there were 40 primary planning areas and 10 secondary planning areas, because there are fewer secondary schools, so they tend to be fewer planning areas. Now there's a clue in the number there. They were aligned to our previous wards and districts. And of course, our wards and districts, our wards particularly changed. And so we've now realigned, we've done that work with the DFE to align our planning areas with super output areas. So there are over 40, goodness, I should have had this number in my head and I haven't. But you're right, the more their planning areas there are, the more precise we can be with the forecast. But your question around that helpful data, 100% Mike, that's on our agenda. And we will be doing that for primary and secondary. So secondary, I think there's about 17 planning areas. So we'll be sharing that with you. So I'll take that back to Peter and Lucy and say, actually, we are now asking for it. It's really good to hear that it was helpful, and we will be rolling that out. It's absolutely our plan to do that in the new year.
Is that and would that be ready for the next forum meeting, Jazz, or is there a timeline a little bit less?
Yeah, Mike, I would love to tell you that it is, but before coming to forum, I just need to do the internal kind of like sense check for it as well. So I will commit to not the next one, but definitely whatever the date for the following one is, we'll put it on the agenda. We will get it to you for that.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. And can I just check, there will be all planning areas, not just the planning areas that are affected that we'll see? Yeah,
all
just so that,
areas.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Jazz.
Yeah, so it is something that we like to share. You know that, Chair, that we're quite proud of that work. So I don't know if Kate has got a comment or But that's a legacy hand, as we call it.
No, it's not a legacy hand. It was a very quick comment. And just because I am an old lady coming up to a birthday, as you do it once a year, it's an annual event, birthdays, isn't it? Is to say that actually, given my career, I have never seen quite such a robust and strategic approach to place planning. And I really think you should commend Jazz and her team for the work that they do around this. It is absolutely superb. And I've been doing this sort of work for 40, 50 odd years. I know I only look about 18, but I'm a little bit older than that. So I really, really think we should commend her. It's really strategic. It's really thought through. It's thorough. It takes on board a lot of issues. It's absolutely superb stuff. So just wanted to say that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kate. Steve.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jazz, for your input there. I'm sure everyone would echo what Kate's just said. It's a slightly off-piece question, maybe, I don't know, but obviously, given the reducing number going through primary that will go through into secondary after the bulge comes through, it'll go back down. I'm just wondering, as we can't spend 5 minutes with any heads about getting onto recruitment, and I'm just wondering whether there's any sense that we could use the potential need for schools to reduce staffing numbers and that strategically across the city, so we can, you know, support each other with recruitment. I don't know, and I know that's more difficult in an academised world and things like that, but I wonder whether it's worth putting any thought into in the near future, because, you know, if schools are potentially considering redundancies and things like that over the next few years as recruitment gets tighter. The primary ITT target was missed, wasn't it, this year? So, you know, we know that is going to get into a bit of a squeeze. Just a suggestion rather than anything else.
Could I come back on that, Chair, and just to say that in other local authorities, head teachers in a sense have made informal arrangements. I understand there's 16 consortia in Birmingham, so actually the heads have come together and said, okay, I'm likely to have a vacancy, you're likely to need to lose someone, let's work together on that, you know. So it's been quite an informal way of doing that, because of course we cannot bypass appropriate HR processes, but they have actually found a way of making that work for them. So, you know, but it's not something in a sense that we can do. It is something that rests a little bit more at school level, and we know head teachers talk to each other a lot about these sorts of things. But as I say, we cannot bypass appropriate HR processes, because that would be inappropriate and would be contrary to equal opportunities. But there is nothing that stops one head teacher making sure that another head teacher knows that actually a vacancy is up and coming, and the person would have to apply through the normal route and the normal processes would apply. So.
Thanks, Kate. Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Just to say that these issues are very close to my heart, having been a school governor of a school which faced a declining birth rate in the immediate area, which meant it came under threat on a number of occasions, but is still open today because it was more than made up for by pressure from surrounding areas. That I really do welcome Jazz's approach and the level of detail and the opportunities to work with schools to see if it feels the same on the ground, or whether there are local issues that may result in hyperlocal pressures as well.
Thank you. Tim.
Yeah, just on the subject of recruitment and people, the Edu Hub, the kind of portal hub that BEP runs, has got a vacancies part to it, and we've previously helped when people have been reorganising and restructuring in hard times, just to informally let people know some of the skills and people that are available. That's number one. I think that the conversation about working at a consortium level is absolutely vital, and I think that everybody has got a responsibility to work out how to make it a collaborative process and not one that pits people against each other, because it's potentially the most problematic, corrosive thing to kind of cooperative, collective working, when people start you know, being really territorial and so forth. So I think, you know, anything that we can do to help keep people vested in one another's interests is ultimately something that will track back to school improvement and the spirit of what we're about.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Jazz, do you wish to pick up the papers?
Yes, please. So, Chair, I'll get to the nitty-gritty of it now, shall I? Okay, I'm going to present the growth paper and then the falling role, and then Jaspal is then going to go through the finances very quickly. You know, what does that mean in terms of finance? So the growth, let me just go to the top of this, just bear with me. As you know, I shan't sit here and read the paper to you, but we are permitted to retain funding to support primary and secondary schools. That includes academies and free schools with significant in-year growth in pupil numbers. We always say this, we always highlight this, that growth funding cannot and must not be used to support schools in financial difficulties or general growth due to popularity, because this is managed through lagged funding. And we do get business cases where there's been a general growth because school is popular, but if it's not coordinated and if it's not part of the in-year growth, then those, not many, but those business cases do get rejected. Again, pupil number growth, as you know, the colleagues who are well versed in this, is through increased birth rates and in-year net migration into the city schools. And that's covered in part A of this report. So in-year admissions required in the event school or school phase closure to manage pupil displacement, and we've had those situations, and we have brought papers to forum around that, and that's covered in part B. And then if we need new schools or new school phases to meet future basic need, and that's covered in part C of this report. So there's 3 elements to it. And then part D then pulls it all together to say, what does that mean in terms of what we need this year? So part A, so this is around growth funding needed to meet basic needs. So this is increased birth rate in your cohort. So again, essentially, and in the main, that's in our secondary school. And it's, as the presentation said, it's the larger primary cohorts are moving through into the secondary. And then that in-year growth that we're beginning to see, that's from year on year, is to manage that. And we are saying, we will talk about this again, the growth fund to provide sufficient school places for 23-24 is 7.268 million is what's required. And this is the criteria in terms of that. So don't forget, this is in year. We are saying we've simplified it from previous years. And basically the criteria to meet that growth is basic need expansions, either permanent and bulges. And I will tell you, in secondary is tending to be either bulges or temporary rather than permanent. And these are expansions that are approved by the local authority, but they are not captured in October census until the following year. The school will be eligible to receive additional funding equivalent to 7/12 of the basic sum for the agreed number of pupils. And then obviously for academies, it's full year, because the academies here run from August to July. So it is that to actually simplify it even more, is the growth that we've agreed and we've planned with schools. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a capital project attached to it. Sometimes, quite often, schools are taking additional places within the capacity available. So the funding rate, we're saying for part A, we always say they keep it in line with OPU, and that's what we are saying again, that planned growth. The funding rate we'd like to recommend that it's kept in line with OPU. So the recommendation for us, the agreement that we will need from Schools Forum, is to agree the criteria and the rate set out above. That's for growth. And then part B is growth in pupil numbers resulting from school closure. So what this is not additional pressure on growth funding, but it's a mechanism for the closing school so any funding from the closing school to be treated to be brought into growth funding so that we can then redistribute it as pupils are then displaced pupils are found new places. And we have had those scenarios a couple of times, but we probably don't need to talk about this too much because there are no planned closures of schools in 23-24, so but criteria remains. So I probably don't need to go into a lot of detail around that. And then there's the phased school closure, which is, sorry, Part B recommendation. We are saying that in exceptional circumstances where school phase closure is required, then I'm sorry, I've lost my place. The funding rate to transfer pupils tailored to the individual school and pupil circumstances subject to sufficient funding within the school retained budget. So actually, I am going to say, because we're not planning any school closure, that probably isn't applicable, but as part of the paper, we do keep it in. And then there's the funding for new schools or new school phases. So again, we had one new school open in September 2022, which was Boa Digital. There is no new schools planned for 2023. However, if we are talking to schools such as All Through Schools, where because of the surplus places in primary, where a school might then reduce their Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 phase and then increase their secondary phase, or even suggest an age range change, this is where we would then use the growth funding to fund that as well. And we are asking that is also capped at full OPU, in line with full OPU. So again, there are no planned the extensions, or there's no planned new schools or new phases currently. However, both the closure of schools or even planned phased closure or phase opening of the schools, we do always bring separate papers to Schools Forum. So should we find ourselves in those situations, we will come back to Forum to say exactly what that means and what the funding implications are. So the recommendation for Part C would really be just to agree the criteria and the rate as set out above. The actual requirements are set out in separate appendix, which I will go to after I've spoken about the basic need, the falling role funding as well. Is that okay, Chair? Okay, so there's the second part to this paper is the falling role. Let me just pull that up. Okay, so the falling role is as set out in the context. Go to the top of the paper. So we are also able to use the DSG schools block to reserve funding to support schools with falling roles, as we've done previously as well. In 22-23, that was set at just over £1 million, and also it's not just maintained school. The fund applies to all schools, including academies and free school as well. So we do have to come to Schools Forum every year, number one, to agree the criteria, and number two, then at this point in December, to ask for an indicative, or to inform you of an indicative figure around falling role. And in January, that will be a definitive figure that we bring to you. So the proposed criteria, if you remember those members that were part of Schools Forum last year as well, that was the first year we came to Forum to ask. Currently, there is a mandatory criteria that falling role schools are on eligible schools must be good or outstanding in their last Ofsted inspection. If we want to work outside of that, we need to make a disapplication to the DFE. And last year, the Schools Forum agreed for us to do that. And we're asking again this year, because of the surplus places situation, we're asking Forum to consider that again. So schools that are less than good or outstanding, we'd like to recommend that we continue with that disapplication route to the DFE. So for the purposes of this, we modelled what that would look like in terms of if we made the disapplication or if we disregarded, if we stayed with good or outstanding school as well. And I'll show you that in at the end of this paper. The other criteria set by the DFE, surplus capacity exceeds 50%, and numbers on roll are at least 5% lower than October 2022 census. So all of that criteria we apply when we are considering eligibility for the schools applying for falling roll. And the other one is the local planning area must show that the places will be required within the next 2 academic years, and that's tied in very much around housing development and also the in-year growth. The other things that need to be taken into consideration in the criteria, if the school will need to make a redundancy in order to contain spending within its formula budget, and schools will be funded for April, August allocation if required to meet staffing cost until the end of the academic year. So we can allow them to do that. And also we've also had these discussions before that schools does not have a surplus balance in excess of 5% of its school budget as at 31st of March. So that's the criteria. The proposed allocation. Now we've done we've done a number of scenarios here. The modelling takes into consideration, first and foremost, if we stayed with the option A, which is good and outstanding only, then we are projecting we will need to fund up to 400 surplus places, and that at 100% OPU will be 1.3 million. But if we also reduce the OPU, it'll be to 75%. It'll be 792,000. If we then went to option B and include schools which are less than good, then that number of places that we will need to, at this moment, the indicative number of places are 580, which will mean at 100% is 1.9 million and at 75% is 1.1 million. So really, there are 2 things that we need Schools Forum to consider. Number one, whether whether the Schools Forum wish to continue with the current arrangements and make the disapplication and consider good schools that are less than good. And the second one is whether Schools Forum agree that we can have the flexibility of applying 100% or 75% OPU. Or if actually Schools Forum want to be very definitive about that, to say it will be 100% or 75%. So those are the 2 things that we need Schools Forum to consider today. I'm happy to take questions at this point, but Jaspal will just go through the financial summary, if that's okay, what all that means.
Okay, thanks, Jazz.
I think there's a question from Kate. I don't know, Chair, if you want to do that first.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Kate, would you?
Yeah, it's
question or comment?
Yeah, it's a quick question, Jazz. It's about accountability and governance. Who makes the final decision? So if the Schools Forum were to want a disapplication, do they make the decision or is it the DFE?
DFE.
It's the DFE. So Schools Forum need to be aware that that decision could be turned down.
Yes.
Because I think that's the important thing for the Schools Forum to bear in mind. Schools Forum also need to bear in mind, and I'm sure will do, what the DFE will take from a decision to ask for schools which are not good or outstanding to be funded. But you'll take that all in the round, I'm sure, Chair. But I just wanted to ask that question. Thank you.
Jaspal, did you want me to share the paper, or are you happy to share the paper?
No, I'm happy to share the paper. So okay, so basically, I'm just going to outline what it means in terms of the financial impact. So obviously, at the moment, the DFE are not making any changes to the way in which local authorities can distribute their growth funding. And what we've actually done, I know Jazz has mentioned that in the grow and falling roll papers, we're just doing an estimate of what our requirements are going to be. So we've actually split the growth funding into two. So there's the implicit growth and then there's the explicit growth. So the implicit growth is a year-on-year growth, whereas the explicit growth is the in-year growth. And obviously we need 3.693 million based on our current estimates for the implicit growth, and we will require 3.575 million for the projected explicit growth. For our projected falling roles fund, again highlighted by Jazz in the falling role paper, it's 1.357 million, which gives us a total requirement of 8.625 million. And we are actually planning to fund this by the DFE recruitment process, and that is, we will be able to recoup 1.022 million, and our projected DFE funding for 22-23, again based on estimated pupil data, will be 5.29 million, which then gives us a shortfall of 2.313 million, which our finance colleagues tell us can be funded through the DSG reserve that we're currently holding. Okay, so that's the financial implications. Any questions?
Chair, can I just mention the 1.3 is based on on schools just considering schools which are good or outstanding, and obviously that figure will need to be adjusted if the forum agreed to go for less, to consider schools which are less than good.
Okay, thank you, Jazz. Are there any further questions? Sean?
Yeah, can I just ask a couple of clarification questions for us to think about before we make the decision next time around? Can I just clarify in terms of priorities for, I suppose, the city, but also Schools Forum? Is it around sufficiency and sustainability of schools or quality of provision? I'm thinking about the disapplication question. So in terms of the drivers we need to respond to. And then the second one is the caveat against all of that is that it's only for a falling role for 2 years would be the criteria you've got. Given that you're talking primary reception place figures falling for the next 4 years in your graphs, would that not just disallow any application pretty much across the city apart from the odd area of spiking growth? So almost these figures are potentially academic.
If I can come into that, Chair. So so the picture around, so the growth is we need to demonstrate that those places will be needed within 2 years. So it's a changing picture, as we've demonstrated, that the falling role are perpetuated because the in-year growth, because of the in-year growth reversing during 1819 and 1920, where families were leaving Birmingham, but now we've got additional families coming in, and that's demonstrated through the resettlement programs as well. So all of that needs to be taken into consideration, and then there's the housing development as well. So it is a changing picture. So the direct answer is no, it's not academic. There is a lot of thought process gone into that in terms of looking at individual schools to see what the place of that school is within that wider demographics of what the area. There is just so much regeneration and housing around the area. It's actually really crucial for us to carry on looking at those schools and the areas on year basis. And the other thing, Sean, is that it was really important, and actually it was a point that James made when we met with the technical group, to say it's really important for Schools Forum to know the context. You know, this is not us coming again and saying, oh, there's still falling birth rates and there's surplus. So the question is, what are you doing about it? So it's that proactive work with schools. So you would hope that by working in the way that we are with schools, that those schools who are experiencing falling birth rate or the adjustment more than 2 years have done something about it, either through CPN or through in-year variation or through their permanently reducing their planned admission numbers. And sorry, just one more thing. This is why our work with consortia is really important, because it's not an individual school decision. It's a group of schools, because what one FE can't go down to half an FE, but a 4 FE in the area may actually be the one that reduces it to 3 FE, so that one FE school has that sustainability, is sustainable. Currently, one thing I didn't say, currently we have no plans to close any schools, because we think it's really important to keep those local schools. So it's a complex piece of work, and I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but it's taken into consideration. The year-on-year assessment is really crucial.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Thank you, Jazz. If there aren't any further questions, Jazz, thank you as always. And just to echo what Kate has said about the quality of the information that's shared, I think we take this for granted sometimes. So it's good to be reminded with an external view at the amount of information and the quality of the information that is provided. Thank you. And yeah, those decisions they will be taken in the January meeting. Is that correct? Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. And that then means it's over to Helen. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so again, I'll just introduce myself again. I'm Helen Ellis and I'm the Director for SEND and Inclusion. I'm really sorry, but I seem to have the sun in my eyes. I hope you can all see me. And just as I get into kind of just a bit of a quick update, I just want to thank everybody for the warm welcome. I've had a real warm welcome into Birmingham, so I really appreciate that, and thank you, particularly from schools as well. So I have been in a number of schools in the space of 6 weeks, and I know I'm coming out to see a lot of schools in the new year as well. So I'm really looking forward to meeting you all and, having a look round your schools as well. So thank you for that. I have picked up, Chair, in relation to some of the actions that were set out in the previous meeting. I haven't got those answers for today, because as you can imagine, I've only been here 6 weeks, so I'm still trying to understand some of the complexities of Birmingham. So, and particularly for this subject area, it's not straightforward at all, is it? So in relation to DLP, I am getting to understand DLP, and I know we've just received, Sue Harrison and myself have just received an evaluation paper, so I really need to understand that, and we will bring something to Schools Forum in the new year, if that's okay. Also, in relation to high needs as well, I'm having to spend, or I need to spend a bit more time with accountancy as well, just to really understand the high needs block and how it's been spent here. And again, what I will assure the forum on is that I will bring a paper to the next forum in January with a bit more of a breakdown on the high needs block and where the spend has been and where the intentions are as well. So if you can just bear with me on that, because as I said, it's been a bit of a whirlwind of 6 weeks, so lots happening, lots of improvement work that has happened, but a lot of improvement work that still needs to happen. So just to give you a feel of what I have been doing is, as you can imagine, my priority has been to really spend a bit more time understanding our SEND service. And understanding the improvement board, working with our commissioner John Coughlin, understanding what John's direction is as well, and the direction of the DCS and our cabinet member as well. So I've been spending time with colleagues to just understand that. So I've completed with the strategic leader seminar. So we've got an interim Joe Sullivan Lyons, and I'm sure you all received that communication to say that there was that change. We've spent quite a time assessing seminar. We've got a full review of seminar, and now we're moving into an action plan. So I'm going to have to really, it's about really chunking up the priorities, because there's a lot to do and we can't do everything all in one go. And what I really want to create is sustainability. So I'm not the type of person to put a plaster on any issue. I'm more about pulling the plaster off and having to go back to basics if we need to, because there's no point in building on shifting sands. So as I said, a lot of work has happened and a lot of good work has happened, but we've got a lot of work to do, because what families are telling us is that they're not feeling the impact on the ground. So until families are feeling that impact, we've got to keep going with the improvement as well. So seminar has been a concentration. We're looking at communication. What I've identified is that we've got a brick wall around seminar, really hard to get in. And once you're in, it's really difficult to navigate. I can see the chair smiling there, so I'm not saying anything that's new here. And what we're going to be issuing is on the 9th of January, week beginning the 9th of January, is a whole communication strategy where seminar service will have a telephone and will be they will be contacting families and schools, etc. And you will know how to make contact as well. And there won't be a 15-day turnaround, it will be a 2-hour turnaround. And that's not where we want to be. We don't want to wait 3 weeks to respond. That's not a responsive service as far as I'm concerned. So lots of work there. We're moving into the quality element, as I said, in relation to the action plan. We have got a very high interim workforce in seminar, and hopefully once funding has been approved, we'll be able to start manoeuvring ourselves into permanent. But I'm not going to stop the improvement just because we've got an interim workforce. It's important that we move into that improvement quickly. So that's just to give you a feel of some of the work. I've also been working hard with the transformation team, understanding our accelerated progress plan. That's really important in relation to DFE and the Commissioner. 4 objectives, as you all know, and again, I'm not sure you know, how we've been updating Forum in relation to the APP, but I will be weaving that activity into papers here as well. So because I think it's really important that the Schools Forum is cited on that that APP movement as well. So as I said, quite a whirlwind. And lots to soak up, a lot for me to still learn, but you know, lots to do. And as I said, I'm really looking forward to working with you all, and just bear with me, just be patient with me, because as I said, I know that there's been series of messages in the past. I think lots of promises in the past, so I'm very mindful of that. And again, you know, I don't want to fall in the trap of making mistakes that, you know, probably previous ADs have made in the past. You know, for me, it's about getting this right for our children in Birmingham. You know, when you get to understand me, I'm very passionate about making sure that our children receive the best possible service and we deliver the best outcomes for our SEND children. So for me, that's how I will drive SEND forward in Birmingham as well. So, you know, my single point of priority is children and families in Birmingham as well. So I am open to questions, but as I said, it's early days still. And as I said, Chair, I will bring updates on DLP and high needs in the new year.
Thank you, Helen, and welcome to Birmingham.
Thank you.
Denise.
Yeah, afternoon, Helen. Just say yes, welcome again to Birmingham, and I know Helen's been working well with us in special forum and with special heads so far, so that's really welcomed. I think just a point from my perspective, the action that is outstanding on the minutes, I think wasn't from the last minutes, I think it was from the previous meeting again, so we're probably talking summer. I personally don't think action should be down to individuals, so it's not a blame of Helen here. But I do think we need to be thinking about this as a schools forum, that we've got actions that are outstanding. New people come in and they say, you know, I'm still getting used to Birmingham and getting familiar with the surroundings. Yes, I understand that, but we've still got actions that are well outstanding and we're not getting information through to schools, and work's then being delayed with families and children as a result. So it's more of a point than a question. I'm not sure there's much we can do around that today, but I think it is something we need to consider.
I think in relation, just responding to that, Denise, and I do understand the issue about the stop-start. I mean, the assurance is that I am permanent, so hopefully going forward that won't be the case. But I do understand that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Helen. Yeah, thank you, Helen. I don't think any of us well, I think all of us understand the magnitude of the role that you've got, and as before, I think we would, all schools and everybody on this forum would offer any support that we can that would help you in understanding the direction better and enabling us to move forward. And I think it's a fair point for Denise that there is a role that schools forum needs to provide with regards to SEND, and I don't think we've necessarily been able to do that to the capacity that we should be, or to the level that we should be. So I think any support around that would be appreciated. Thank you. Look forward to speaking to you. Thanks, Helen. Okay, and if there's no further questions, I think that we can move on to the CSSB provisional budget for 23-24. Is that you, Terry?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'll just share the paper that members will have received on the provisional allocations for the CSSB. So can everyone see that paper? Yeah. So members of the forum will have received a report on the provisional allocations for the DSG CSSB block for 23-24. Now, this paper's simply for discussion at the moment, and it's more informative at this stage because the DSG allocations we're expecting to be published tomorrow or next week, early next week at the latest. It usually comes out around the 16th, 17th or 18th of December. So the revised paper with kind of proposed options will come out in the January 2023 schools forum. So if I'd just like to go through the allocations, then the national funding formula allocations that were published in July. So Birmingham City Council was awarded a provisional allocation of 8.22 million for 23-24, which is in point 2 on the report. So this is a reduction of 810,000 when comparing from the figure for 22-23. Now we do expect CSSB to reduce year on year because of the historic commitment element, which covers contributing to children's services equal pay, the early help and brokerage service, school improvement and nursery redundancies. So these are commitments that that the council had prior to CSSB being devised in 2017-18 by the DFE, which replaced the previous education services grant. So So the overall change in 21-22, Birmingham did, and prior to that, Birmingham did receive additional funding of 10 million for the equal pay commitments, but this ceased in 22-23, and in 22-23 and 23-24. The ongoing reduction of 20% against the historical commitments has continued. Now, Birmingham City Council has consulted with the DfE previously on protection against historic commitments reducing, because obviously we've still got the costs year on year, but we can't be protected against that reduction until funding falls below 660,000, and that's not estimated to take place until 2025-26. So until that time, we have to either allocate additional money for historic commitments from ongoing responsibilities, or utilise any DSG reserves that we've got to fund that. The funding, the national funding formula provisional allocations for 23-24. As I said previously, come to 8.22 million, and that is made up of historic commitments of 922,000 and ongoing responsibilities of 7.3 million, which is an increase of 2.10% for ongoing responsibilities when comparing to 22-23. So we've done some calculations, and if I move to Appendix 1, which point 3 refers to, we've discussed two options at the moment. So the first option is to leave the ongoing responsibilities allocations at 22-23 levels, with additions in admissions of 40,000 for the contact centre recharge, and the increase in copyright licenses, which is assumed to be 4% based on the percentage increase between 21-22 and 22-23, and also the clerking service, which will need some additional funds for. But everything else in option 1 is kept at 22-23 levels. So with option 1, we need to transfer with both options, we need to transfer 1.125 million to our historical commitments, to ensure that we can meet those historical commitments in the first part of the table. But in order to do this and to fund all our ongoing responsibilities at 22-23 levels, we need to take £46,000 from reserves from the CSSB DSG reserve, which currently stands at 1.714 million. So that would, in effect, reduce the reserves to 1.668 million, which is shown in the shading in yellow in the table. So option 2 then. So option 2 is to increase by 2.1% on the ongoing responsibilities, and that's the increase in ongoing responsibilities that the DfE have provided in the national funding formula allocations. As I said before, the DSG allocation will come out. I'm expecting it tomorrow. So that percentage could be different, and the allocation to Birmingham could be different. So these figures will need revising. But if we do increase ongoing responsibilities by 2.1%, the historical commitments remain the same, but we'll need to borrow from reserves, not borrow, sorry, but we'll need to reduce reserves by 156,000 from the 1.714 million, or that's actually sitting in there at the moment, which will reduce it to 1.558 million. But we're not looking for a decision on these options today, because obviously these are not the actual allocations. These are just kind of for modelling purposes at the moment. So if I just go back up to the main report then. It says a potential third option is still being considered prior to schools forum meeting. We're still in discussions about that. There were 3 options presented in the last year's settlement. So we're waiting to see what our allocation is, and then whether we'll need to borrow more, well, take more money from reserves, or whether we'll need to take any money from reserves at all. So in January at the technical group, I'll bring all those calculations based on the actual DSG allocations. So benchmarking then. So Appendix 2 sets out the benchmarking information extracted from tables issued by the DFE. And overall, Birmingham City Council compares well to neighbouring authorities in respect of CSSB elements. Supporting information is attached in Appendix 3, which gives further details of admissions and safeguarding and early help, and then Appendix 4 on statutory functions. So the recommendations and discussions I've put in there that the options are provisional allocations based on estimates. So a revised paper will be produced in January 2023, showing recommendations and seeking a decision following publication of the 23-24 dedicated schools grant allocation, which has historically been published in the 3rd week of December of the prior financial year. And it's usually on the Friday, so we are expecting it tomorrow. Has anyone got any questions?
Mike?
This might be a really silly one, Terry, so forgive me, but as I've gone through October papers, and then there's 2 papers that have been presented today, one of which is yours, there are 3 suggested uses of reserves, but how's that money from reserves going to be put back if some of these costs that are going to be covered by reserves are recurrent costs?
Sorry, Mike, are you referring to the CSSB reserves or DSG in full?
Well, I mean, for this bit, CSSB, but I suppose the question is a bit broader than that, because there was a suggestion of the growth fund being subsidised by 2.3 million from presumably the schools block. You know, how's the money going to get put back if those reserves are used?
Well, I mean, the DSG, the DFE/ESFA's guidance does state that they do expect the DSG to be allocated in the financial in the year that it's allocated in full in the year that it's published. So although they do recognise that the authorities do have either surpluses or deficits, it's not advised by them that they do carry reserves on DSG. It is meant to be all spent within the year. So those reserves, those CSSB reserves, will help Birmingham cover its historic commitments going forward over the CSSB plan, which takes us up to 31-32. Now, a lot of authorities, especially around the INES block, are in substantial deficit positions. So they're not actually carrying reserves, they're carrying kind of deficits on the DSG. So our Birmingham's DSG reserves are not, I wouldn't class them as materially substantial, and will be utilised going forward. So we're not like academies, for instance. They're expected to have a kind of reserves, a reserves pot to cover any kind of academies having to kind of close, to cover all their commitments going forward. But the SFA does not expect authorities to do that with the DSG. They expect it all to be allocated within the year.
Kate, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, just to reiterate what Terry's said, and maybe Terry and you and I need to have a conversation outside of this meeting, and then probably with you, James, before the next meeting. DFE expectation would be that the DSG is for the funding for the children and young people for that particular year. That is where they come from. And that's a reasonable position to take, because actually that's what we're given the money to spend on. So we should be spending it on them. And in a sense, you could take a position, I'm not saying I do, but you could take a position that unspent balances and reserves are money that should have been spent on children and young people and haven't been. And that's not a position that anybody would want to put themselves into. So it's quite a complicated one. So I think we just maybe need to think it through a bit better, but maybe that's for outside this meeting.
Yeah, thank you. Catherine, do you want to come in there?
Just in the pre-meeting, we did discuss reserves and the kind of risk of the default being, well, we'll just use reserves. And I think, James, we talked about wanting to see a bit of a profile of the various reserves and then the commitment on against them over a period of time.
Yeah, and I think that picks up the point that Mike was making. And I think we're in agreement with Kate and Terry here that we agree that the funding allocated to pupils should be spent in year. I think possibly the fear here is that a number of budgets seem to be presented where we are relying on reserves. And I think it's a question of, is the situation where we are relying on reserves, or do we actually have to look at the commitments that we've got and adjust those to fit the budgets that we've got? So I wonder if that's something, Kate and Terry, that we can take away and hopefully capture so that it makes more sense, and bringing the reserves together and the reasons why the budgets appear to need these reserves at present.
Yeah, I think the other issue for me, and I think you're absolutely right, Chair, we need to just take this back and take a bit more of a strategic approach. And it's the same for local authorities as it is in a sense for schools and multi-academy trusts. If you've got high levels of reserves, DFE will quite reasonably say, and again, I don't agree with it, but it's a reasonable position, why should we give you any more money? Quite clearly, you don't spend it. What you do is you squirrel it away, don't you? You know? So we've all been there. So I think a strategic approach to actually using those reserves appropriately over the next couple of financial years might be the sensible way to go, Chair. I think that's a really good idea.
That would be great. I won't invite Patrick to comment on that from the DFE. He mentioned that he's only here as an observer and not to contribute. So, but it would be interesting to hear the feedback there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Claire, would you like to come in there?
Thanks, Chair. Just to second what Kate and Terry have said, really, in terms of the CSSB, we've recognised that we need to do a review of the commitments against it to ensure that we've got enough funding to meet those commitments on an ongoing basis. So where we've got the reduction to the historic funding, that's where we're using the reserve, and we will work with Schools Forum to look at those commitments over the next, well, we'll do it into the new calendar year. We won't leave it until the end of the calendar year. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Mike. Kate and Catherine, you've still got your hands up, are they? Thank you. Okay, are there any further questions for Terry? No, I think just from me, Terry, just looking at the benchmarking, there is, when you're looking at the contribution to combined budgets, Birmingham seems to be £50 per pupil over the average. Is there a reason for that? I think you're on mute, Terry.
Yeah. Sorry, Chair. I'm not sure at the moment, Chair. Can I look into that and bring it to the January forum with the updated figures?
If you could, thank you. Claire, do you have an answer?
I think looking at it, and we will do some further investigation, and obviously different authorities categorise things in different ways, but because Birmingham looked lower on some of the other headings, I think it's just the way that we have sort of pulled more into that 1.4.1, but we'll look at that and come back to you.
Thank you. And probably just worth noting that when we're talking about pupil growth, that we do seem to be, what are we, probably 50% below the average there. So that is just a note, really, bearing in mind we've had Jazz speaking today. Okay. Thank you, Terry. If there are no further questions for Terry, I will move on to the delegation local authority schools consultation update.
Thank you, Chair. So on the 3rd of November, the authority sent out a consultation document to local authority maintained schools with regards to delegation. So the delegation areas, which are contingencies, facilities, time and behaviour support services, they're funded within the schools block, and we're proposing an increase of 1.9% as per the national funding formula rate. Now, we've only had a response from one school, and we did give them till the final Friday in November. So that's from Little Sutton Primary School, who have said that they're comfortable with the delegation areas continuing and with the 1.9% increase. But as I say, this is the national funding formula rate, which is a provisional rate, and the schools block allocation we're expecting to come out tomorrow. So that could potentially change as well.
Okay, and so was the consultation on the 3 delegated areas?
It was, yes.
It wasn't on the any minimum funding for the NFF?
No, it was just on the delegation.
Yeah. Thank you. Kate?
Again, through you, Chair, I think this is one of the issues I would want to pick up with you outside of this meeting, and possibly with Terry as well. You know, we've got quite a few people in this meeting in schools forum. We can't have a position where just one school responds to a consultation, even if, as I understand it, it's the same level, it's the same areas of delegation that we've put up in previous years. I think we need to take a more strategic approach to that and maybe review the whole thing again. And we would expect, of course, schools to want to have their voices heard if we do something like that. And I think that's the way through this one.
Thank you. Maxine?
Yeah, can I just say that because I'm representing schools here, it's not normally the way that we do it, and most schools know that. In the past, what we've done is discuss it at primary forum, and then primary forum, the reps that sit on here have brought forward the consensus from there. So I'm assuming that a lot of schools didn't answer the consultation because they've assumed it's happened in the previous way that it's always happened as long as I've sat on schools forum, is that it's come through your primary forum reps. So that might be a reason why it hasn't happened, and nobody was expecting it to happen that way this year.
That's really, really helpful, but it does mean we need to revisit that process so we're all aware of it and how it needs to work in the interest of our representatives at schools forum. So.
Thank you, Maxine. Thanks, Kate. And David?
Yeah, I was going to make the same point Maxine's just made. That is the way that these things have always been done in the past, and it is the job of people who sit at this meeting who represent their members that vote on these things. So I don't quite know how we've got to the position where one school is responding and that is now potentially impacting on a decision. That's not the right way to go about this. Of course, there's no problem with informing schools and all of those sort of things, transparency, but it is the role of people on this forum to do that, I think, and to channel the feedback in the way that Maxine has already suggested. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. Kate?
Yeah, just then to make a suggestion, can we bring back a process paper to the next schools forum explaining how these processes work so that everybody understands them and everybody agrees them, and there may be some tweaks that members of schools forum want to put forward, but let's just get this right for the future, yeah?
Yeah, I think we can review the processes, and yes, we will bring, we'll either refresh ourselves of the clarity that we once had, or we will ensure that we've got the clarity moving forward.
Yeah, and as you've said, James, we've got some new members to schools forum, so you know, unless we've got a paper that tells them how it works, how will they know how it works? And that's the obligation we need to give to each other to support each other in understanding some of these things. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kate. Steve?
I mean, I suppose just as obviously the behaviour support money comes to COBS, and I'm perplexed at how this consultation's gone out, because whilst listening to what Kate's saying, I'm not sure who decided to go out. I don't think I've missed a schools forum meeting where it was suggested a consultation went out, and it just feels like that there's a lack of reliance on what would be perhaps organisational memory, a lot of which exists around this table. So I'm not sure how that's happened, and maybe that could be looked into, sort of who decided almost unilaterally to go, oh, let's go out to every school in Birmingham, when, you know, I know for a fact that I went to primary forum, I presented on the work we've done in the previous 12 months with the money, because it only relates to primary forum. They questioned me, I showed them the data, and, you know, as far as I'm aware, they made a decision on behalf of everyone. And yeah, I just wonder, Kate, whether you perhaps commit to go back and find out how it happened in the way it's happened, because it's a bit concerning, because I think we've got good organisational memory over this. I'm not sure that the process was confused in the forum, if I'm being honest. Thank you.
I know that's really, really helpful, and I'll commit to doing that. And as I say, also bringing a paper which explains the process, which will be helpful to me, I'm sure, helpful to new members, and maybe helpful to old members who can tell us that we've got it slightly wrong and we need to tweak it a little bit. So let's just make sure we all have a shared understanding of what the process is, so that, as you say, we don't rely on one school and we actually capture all the school voices, which will be many and varied within Birmingham, but it's important that we capture them all. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. And David?
Yeah, just to I agree with Steve, by the way, on the points he made. Just to say, in response to Kate's point, like, how will people know? How will new members of Forum know what the processes are? Yes, supporting documents will play an important part in that, but also, of course, the thing that we've talked about in recent meetings, and that is an induction process for new members that I think Lisa Fraser is moving forward. So all of those things together should help us avoid this situation occurring in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. Okay. Yeah, thank you for that update. If there is any other business, actually, we do have an Oracle update, and that's from HR Business Partner Schools. I'm not sure who's delivering this, so.
Hi, James, that would be me.
Hi, Paul. Okay.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Hi, colleagues. I've been asked to pop in and give you a latest update on a recent event that took place. I understand that forum members have had a number of questions about the current state of developments with Oracle. Just to let you know that a major workshop took place, a discovery workshop involving between 12 and 15 representatives of school bursars group or business managers, kind of that group of people, specifically to target their experiences of current Oracle use and to take extensive feedback. Now, in that room at the time, there were 6 or 7 senior version 1 representatives who are the programmers that now lead the council through developing and implementing the system. In addition, there were members of various finance colleagues, HR colleagues, procurement, so that we were able to get to the bottom of a list of priority improvements. I can confirm that following that, it was quite a challenging event. I think it's safe to say that everyone very clearly had a say and specified they were representing their own consortium schools. So although it was only 12 to 15 members, they each represented a school consortium or group. At the end of that was produced a list of 21 priority improvement actions. As an outturn of that, the BCC representatives who are the lead in this area, which is Sarah Pitt for Finance and Rebecca Hemsley for HR, have met with version 1 to agree some form of prioritisation, but very much based on the very explicit feedback of the group on that day. And my understanding is that those 21 actions will list an improvement kit or set that will be communicated out to schools so that schools can see them and input into them more widely if need be, but it will also give a very transparent view on the nature of the improvement actions taking place in the next weeks after Christmas. So that's where it's currently at. I believe that's all I was asked to do today, but I'm happy to take back any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Paul. That's appreciated. Mike?
Yeah, just a point of clarification, Paul, if that's okay. You said that there were 15 people at the meeting and they were predominantly business managers and bursars. Where was the invite to this event broadcast?
I believe, well, I didn't send it out, but I believe it was sent out in several ways. I believe it was sent out on Bursars Network. I believe it was also sent out through our communications channels, and I also believe it may have gone out, but I'd need to double check, so I wouldn't wish to mislead the group in school notice board.
Because 15 is quite a small number considering how many schools there are probably using Oracle across the city, and I just wonder, is there a plan to try to broaden that feedback and kind of troubleshooting scenario based stuff out, because people may not have had the capacity to attend an event at that level, but they would happily provide some other written feedback, which if it was to be sent in piecemeal on email, it's not really going to be of value, whereas a mechanism for that to be gathered more broadly, more widely might also refine some of those actions, potentially refining the 21 or adding to the 21. Is there a plan for that to happen?
I concur wholeheartedly with everything you just said, Mike, which is why I didn't arrange the event per se. I was just the HR representative at the event. But what I can tell you is considerable thought was given to the representatives representing their relevant consortia. So although they were there from one school, so for example, 3 of the people physically bought an actual list and went through all the feedback from their consortium, identifying schools in particular where necessary. In terms of your suggestion, I'll certainly take that back. What I can tell you is there is indeed a further follow-up event in late January. I think it's scheduled for the 24th. And just to be clear, this wasn't a virtual event, neither will the next one be. They were housed in Woodcock Street, so we had all the people in a room and were able to thoroughly explore the issues. And I believe that will be the same again on the 24th. And I see no reason why that couldn't be extended more widely to colleagues across schools in light of your comment.
And perhaps considering whether face-to-face is even from a capacity point of view possible. You know, schools in the midst of winter are dealing with quite high levels of staff absence. And I just think some thought might be to make sure people have had the opportunity to feedback and be part of that process, either directly or at an arm's length. Some thought might need to be given to maximising engagement by multiple routes to engage.
Noted, and I'll certainly take that back. What I can say is the original event was face-to-face because that was largely what the schools that were involved requested. We thought it was time to be able to put a very large group of people in a room and, if need be, go through nth degree of detail, which is why it was targeted at business managers and bursars who are regularly using the system in particular. But I see no reason why there couldn't be another one or an additional one that was virtual to address the issue you've raised.
And perhaps something for HR managers in larger schools, Paul.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mike. Mashouk, do you want to come in there?
Yes, it's to support really what Mike was saying. My school doesn't have a bursar at the moment. We've had difficulty in recruiting one, and yet our resources committee has consistently been asking questions around Oracle because of the amount of funding that we are holding in trust. So I think it would be important if we could have some form of documentation of what happened in those workshops and what were the 21 actions and how they came about. So we do need a briefing paper coming to this platform, but also to schools themselves, because chairs of resources committees are really concerned about where we are regarding the financial implications of the Oracle system.
Yeah, as I say, Nashuk, the intention is certainly to share the 21 and communicate them to all schools. In terms of coming back to this group, I'll happily request that we add an additional briefing paper to that 21 list to give a bit of background on how it got to that position, and I'll ask for it to be submitted to this group in due course, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Pam?
Yes, just a complete clarification there. Thank you for saying that there's going to be a PEPR on the 21 actions. Do we have a definitive timeline for that? When is that due to go out to the schools? As you can appreciate it, we've waited a very long time. Yeah, so do we have a definitive timeline as to when that is going to be issued? Please.
Honestly, I couldn't give you an absolute. What I can tell you is I've seen the provisional, and the only thing holding up its release is that this time I understand that the council colleagues are being absolutely certain about what the programme looks like. So those 21 actions, you'll not only get a list of them, but you'll see a clear timeline on their delivery. To make sure that all parties all key stakeholders in the process really have a very clear view of what will be delivered and when. To be honest, I'm told we're anticipating it will go out in the first week in January, but I couldn't give you an absolute specific date, I'm afraid.
No, I appreciate that, as long as it is early next term. I think it's essential that that takes place, but thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Paul, can I just check? Are you just dealing with are you dealing with the HR element and not the finance, or is it both HR and finance that you're dealing with?
No, I'm the project itself has concluded one stage. It has now split into two groups, and there is a finance group and a HR group. Rebecca Hemsley is the lead for HR, but she chaired that event back in November because Sarah Pitt wasn't able to attend. Sarah Pitt, as FD, is the lead on finance matters Oracle moving forward. Yep. I'm just here today to give a generic summary of the two, or rather of the single event, but I'm probably not equipped to get into finance related specifics, I'm afraid.
No, I'm just looking at some of the actions. I think we've discussed this before, that I don't think this is necessarily comes under the Business of Schools Forum, but because of the impact on schools and the absence of anywhere else for this to be discussed, it seems to end up being discussed on Schools Forum. I think from the actions, and I think I'm probably Claire, I think we're probably not. I don't think we've necessarily resolved the issues that were identified with regard to the technical group and the understanding what we're doing in response to Oracle. So I'm just wondering if there's a way of communicating that, because I think it's clear it hasn't got through to the members, and this has probably got more attention than anything else on the agenda, which probably shouldn't be the case.
The discovery session was that opportunity, in terms of a technical group. It was done through the technical, through the discovery session. And as Paul said, that covered HR and finance. I wasn't present at the discovery session myself, but we did have finance representatives there. We had people from accounts payable, from payroll, from schools financial services. So I think really in terms of, as Paul has highlighted, it's about ensuring that the invite is going out to the appropriate people for the next session, and that everybody that wants to participate, be there by either in person or on Teams, has the opportunity to do so, rather than a separate technical group of Schools Forum that's covering the same topics, because I don't think that's going to add any value for anybody.
Thanks, Claire. Kate? I thought you got your hand up there, Kate. I thought that was a kind of a virtual hand in.
No, I didn't. No. I should have put my. If I'm going to put a hand up, it's me.
That's
hand,
fine.
So,
yes.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay. So yeah, I think if that open invite for all stakeholders is available, so that we can address the HR and finance issues regarding Oracle, I think that would be much appreciated.
I will ensure that gets circulated.
Thank you.
And as we've said, I think the 21 actions and the plan around those hopefully should cover off everything that is known and everything that you would be raising anyway. So by all means, then if there's anything missing from that plan, but hopefully it does capture everything from a HR and finance perspective. As Paul says, I think it was quite a detailed session that took place.
Great. Okay, and thank you, and thank you for the work that you carried out there. Okay, is there any other business? Claire?
Thank you. I just wanted to, as we've got a couple of minutes, just let you all know that Xiao Ming, who has been the finance manager on the schools and fair funding team, she leaves Birmingham City Council in January. And as you've probably picked up from today's session, Terry Shaw will take over as the finance manager. So I just wanted to say a big thank you to Xiao, and just let you all know that moving forwards, it will be Terry as the finance manager contact.
Thank you. And if we capture that in the minutes, to thank Xiao's efforts in supporting Schools Forum. Thank you very much, Xiao, and all the best for the future. And
Thanks
Terry,
very much for all your support.
That's okay. Thanks, Xiao.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask the technical group that was originally planned for the 5th of January. Yes. Has that been agreed to move it to the 10th of January just to allow preparation of the...
Thank you for the reminder. Yes, we did agree that, Terry. Thank you very much for the reminder.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Could we make sure that we get the invite out to all of the members, the open invite, if people wish to attend the technical group sooner rather than later, because we did have that date of the 5th arranged. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Is there any other business? No. Okay. In that case, as always, thank you very much from me for your time in supporting Schools Forum, and I hope you have a great Christmas break and Happy New Year. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All the best.